We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in Albuquerque, New Mexico on 1000 KKIM. Clay took a little nap during the break, so we're doing fine. And our guest in studio, a friend of ours, an attendee of the 60th anniversary services ending the Korean War, Alonna Moreno.
And with the BNI.
And with BNI. She's a regional director for BNI. How about that, huh? So, Alonna, I mean, this is fascinating to me, personally, again, because my dad was in Korea, and I know some of the jobs he had in Korea were, for a while there, he was doing body bags. He had that responsibility as a sergeant, and, it's a little tough when you look at it from that angle. When you were there, you had this interaction with some of the soldiers.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the. There was a story you were telling us off the air about a hospital ship.
Yes, my father was on a hospital ship, USS Repose, and it was interesting when on the flight over, because it's such a long flight. My mom was up and walking around, and she started talking to a gentleman that said that during the time frame my dad was on a hospital ship, that he got pulled onto the hospital ship, and so he got pictures of himself as he was from recuperation, had pictures of himself on the hospital ship. So there was a connection made there, and he said he's going to send my mom and I pictures. But as far as some of the emotional aspects of what some of these gentlemen, the Turkish man I told you about earlier, in regards to seem very agitated and angry, the last night we had a fabulous dinner. The way we were treated was amazing. But he was sharing that night through a translator that when he left Korea over 60 years ago, he was very angry because this country was completely devastated. There was barely any vegetation. Buildings were destroyed. They didn't have any infrastructure. And he was thrilled and happy when he came back to Korea 60 years later, and to see what the Koreans have done with the gift of freedom and democracy that we've helped
the South Koreans have
South
done.
Koreans, yes, the South Koreans have accomplished.
I'm always interested as to why our vets want to go back to the countries they served in. I mean, I served during the Vietnam crisis, and I have no interest in going to Vietnam, personally.
I think some of these veterans, they went just because it was paid for, and some of them were kind of apprehensive as far as what to expect. But once they stepped foot on and how they were received by the volunteers that were there in the Korean War Church, I mean, we were like celebrities. We had paparazzi, people taking pictures of us all the time. And once they had that experience and saw that they were being honored, they felt honored that they were there to be able to participate and to see this huge celebration of 60 years of a ceasefire.
It's interesting that you mention that, because everywhere our soldiers go, they're always recognized and appreciated, everywhere except in the United States.
Yes.
Which is really sad. And that's why I really like this program where we fly our veterans back to Washington, D.C. to look at the various memorials. And now they're even inviting the Korean vets to go back on that program.
The honor flight, yeah.
The honor flight.
And it's because we're running out of World War II veterans. They're dying off at such a fast rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's like even these the Korean War veterans, some of them are in their late 70s, early 80s. One gentleman was like 85 years old, and he was saying that he was amazed at what had taken place when he left to when he came back, and he was just astounded by it and appreciative. They are looking back that this was worth it.
Yeah,
this was worth our efforts.
Sure, and a lot of these people were also fought in World War II, because you're looking at only a 5-year span between the end of World War II and the beginning of the Korean War.
Yeah.
So a lot of them were veterans that came back because they had the war experience. Some of them had a hard time finding a job. So here's an opportunity to go back in the service and do what they're used to doing.
Exactly. And one thing the South Koreans have said is, let us never forget, because here we were, a small little country, and we had a cry for help because we were being attacked by a larger entity. And the UN and the United States, along with other countries, came along and supported, and people went to a country they never really heard of and gave their blood, sweat, and tears. It was amazing at the War Museum that they had there at the memorial. There was people finding names of their friends that had died in the process of it. And one gentleman said this one guy that he found, Johnny E. Wild, I believe was his name, the very first day that he arrived there and was on the battlefield, died.
Ow.
But it was his friend. But it's like, it was exciting to see that, I found him.
Sure. We're having a conversation with Alonna Moreno, an attendee at the 60th anniversary services ending the Korean War.
You know, did you hear any conversation between the vets, any discussion regarding the support for South Korea that we have today through our administration or our support for Israel or other countries?
What was interesting is we went to the U.S. military base, and their mission is to stand alongside the South Koreans to be that assistance. But interesting enough, of the all military that's there in South Korea, only 10% is the U.S. The rest of it, 90%, is all South Koreans, because now they make it mandatory that young men actually go into the military service.
Oh, sure, they have to. You know, countries
Yeah.
like South Korea and Israel, I mean, it's mandatory for their own defense. You know, something you said, I have to agree with. Clay brought up the question, you know, why would these people come back? I think for a lot of them, like the Turkish gentleman, it's closure.
Yes.
You know, these are wounds that for some of these people have been open for years and years, and now they've got a chance to end it and kind of, you know,
Have peace.
yeah, have peace with it. So
Yeah.
it's you know, it's difficult for these guys. You know, and for, you know, even for your mom, I mean, here it is, you know, she's getting to revisit something that her husband had gone through and she went through here, you know,
Yeah.
as a spouse.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So I just, and me, even as the next generation back, I have a greater appreciation for the things my father did and the men of his generation and so forth. And it's like my heartfelt responsibility is to give honor to them, as well as to give credibility to the South Koreans for what they've done with the help they received.
Did you notice a major difference? I mean, you talked about the facade that they had at the border, but were you able to see it further into the country to see some of the situations that are taking place over there, the way people are treated or anything?
No, we didn't. All it was by what the information that was shared by the South Koreans, and their heartfelt. We got to hear the president of South Korea. She gave a speech at the day of the anniversary at the War Museum, and she, later on I found out because she said it all in Korean, but she was even saying that we want to have unity throughout the whole peninsula of Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And their heart's desire is for that.
It's interesting when you look on a map at night and you see where South Korea is totally lit up and North Korea is totally black.
Dark, yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that.
It's really something to see.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks volumes for the economy between the two countries.
Well, yeah, and a lot of South Koreans actually cross the border daily and used to work in North Korea, but I don't know if they're still doing that or not.
No.
Yeah, because of the tension going on with the
Exactly.
two countries. Yeah. You know, it's interesting, Alana, about 20 years ago, so my oldest daughter was going to Cal Lutheran, and she did a Holocaust Day where she had Holocaust survivors put on a day of remembrance, and you know the students were there and they got to hear from people that actually had gone through that experience in World War II. Unfortunately, I think we're missing the boat because we're losing that generation, we're losing the Korean War generation, and we need to have people like that talk to students and
Yeah.
you know, go on shows like this and you know, show the experience, because if we don't, people will lose that and they'll lose what happened, and you know, unfortunately we'll have the same experience happen again because we're not learning from history.
That's exactly right. That's the one thing they said, lest we forget, we were all given rings attached to a scarf,
Oh,
all of
wow.
us that visited.
Mhm.
And I've taken this ring and I've been wearing it ever since then, just because of the fact that I do not want to forget.
Mhm.
And one thing that even the South Koreans are doing, because now they have a generation of young children who don't understand the full impact of what took place in that
Sure.
country, that now they're making it a requirement in their education system for them to know. And it's just not the schools, but it's also the churches that are wanting them to not forget.
Well, we're also keep changing history. This particular
Yes.
government seems to change the rules and what actually took place, and we're really fortunate that pictures were taken back in Germany when they executed the Jews. Otherwise, we wouldn't even believe that it ever happened.
Exactly.
Mhm, sure. And looking at the rationale behind why we went to war. I mean, you know, I've had this debate with friends of mine about the Korean War and about the Vietnam War. You know, as far as whether or not we should have been there. You know, Korea was pretty clear cut. I mean, that's an act of aggression there.
It was.
So, you know, we were there for the right reason.
I
So,
totally believe that. I
Yeah.
truly do.
Well, it's interesting. I served during the Vietnam crisis, and when I got out of the service, they gave me a really nice medal. It was called the Purple Shaft with barbed wire clusters. But I'm sure that didn't happen to the Korean vets.
no, but
And when we came back, people did not like us.
I can remember I was in the Marines. I can remember being stationed in the South and actually literally 3 times in one evening being run off the road when people saw my no haircut, and it was obvious that we were in the Marines, and literally run off the road 3 times by 3 different trucks.
But it was different for the Korean vets. It was different for the World War II vets.
Yes.
We were really behind them.
Yeah, we were. But, the thing about Korea, it was one of those situations where it was kind of a lost war because it was stuck in between the other wars that we had.
What war have we won? I mean, realistically, what war have we won recently?
That sounds like fodder for another show.
Yeah.
Elena, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
We will see you in 167 hours on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.